All right, and welcome to the Leverage ServiceNow IRM to automate and optimize IT risk management programs. This is a joint webinar with Edgile and ServiceNow. So let's go over a couple housekeeping items. Your audio has been muted for the duration of the presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A panel through the chat. Make sure that you're sending it either to the panelist or to the panelist and all attendees. We are here to answer these questions. And this is also going to be recorded and available on demand. So looking forward to having you guys watch it again and again. Just an introduction, my name is Cliff Harris. I'm the Director of Risk Solution Sales at ServiceNow. And I am really pleased to have Edgile here. And I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Brian Risman to get started.
Thanks very much, Cliff. And thanks for joining us. This is Brian Risman speaking from Edgile, joined with Jay Dial and Giovanni Sparazio. For those of you not familiar with Edgile, we're a Wipro company, and we are also an elite partner of ServiceNow in the risk and security space. I'm one of the two partners that looks after our practice. Jay Dial here is one of our directors and looks after our risk pillar. And we have Giovanni Sparazio, one of our go-to-market managers. So today we're going to take you through a really exciting journey around IT risk management. We're going to spend some time in the system as well and make sure that we can answer any questions that you have through that Q&A feature. We go to the next slide here. What you'll see here is our 5-pass journey to get up and running with IT risk management as well as integrated compliance. We believe that journey should be multidisciplinary, and one of the best starting points to do that is through an integrated risk register. That's what you see here with Pass 1. Giovanni's going to talk in a few moments about how we can accelerate that journey through content with both risk statements and control objectives. From there, once you've identified your risk foundations, we then need to apply that out to the operating environment, and that's done through the Pass 2 applicability matrix. Pass 3 is where we rapidly identify capabilities and identify potential gaps through assessing the overall organization through surveys, diagnostics, attestations. And then once we identify where the highest risk areas are in the organization, that's where we go through our Pass 4 and Pass 5 techniques, where we document actual controls and then perform that evidence-based testing, if you will. We'll bring this to life in the demo shortly, but before that, we really believe that a lot of those foundations come from industry-specific content. So Giovanni's going to spend a few minutes talking about how we bring all that together to lay these integrated risk management foundations. Gio.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. So at Edgile, we've developed about 25 certified built on now applications on the ServiceNow store, of which 20 are industry-specific content packs that are made up of the various laws, regulations, and frameworks that organizations need to comply with. Our Edgile automated regulatory compliance content has 3 components, which you'll see along the middle row here. And these include the ongoing monitoring of those laws, regulations, and frameworks, the complementary regulatory change management workflows to go manage the changes of those laws and regulations within ServiceNow, as well as the ability to produce audience-specific reporting, even on a mandate-by-mandate basis. Currently, we maintain over 650 different authoritative sources in ARC, which are decomposed into these discrete topical citations that are each mapped against a succinct index of about 250 integrated requirements, which really align risk statements with related control objectives. While there's other content providers out there, what's unique about our content is that it brings the worlds of risk and compliance together, whereas others don't.
Hey, Giovanni, we just had a question come in. If someone was using NIST or High Trust or something like that, how would this work with that?
Cliff, that's a great question that we just got there. So, this library of laws, regulations, and frameworks that Edgile has today has over 650 laws, regulations, and frameworks that we're monitoring on an ongoing basis. We continuously add to that library. So just last quarter, we added over 50 new sources. A lot of those requests for sources actually come from our clients and their ever-changing needs in the regulatory environment. But some of the ones you mentioned, for example, like NIST and HIPAA and some of the ISO standards, et cetera, those are already there, if you will. So what we've done is that we've allowed us to harmonize those together because oftentimes they're saying the same thing. But then it's really that compliance reporting, kind of mandate by mandate specific reporting application that we built as well, allows us to unwind all of that integration so that if we need to look at it just from a NIST view or just from an ISO view or just from a HIPAA view, we can do that as well. So we're allowed to look at it both ways, both from an integrated perspective as well as from a mandate by mandate perspective. So a lot of those sources you mentioned are there. There's over 600. We're happy to share, views of what that full list looks like for anyone interested.
Perfect, thank you.
Awesome. So here's an example of how our content works. So if I might draw your eye to the right, many different laws, regulations, and frameworks are all saying the same thing about the user termination process, for example. So essentially what we're doing with our content is mapping what each of these different sources say about that specific topic to achieve that harmonization that Brian just spoke of, and also remove the burden of our clients having to figure this part out by going to build those control frameworks themselves. And this is the Edgile IT risk management taxonomy that's behind our content. And you'll see that it has 6 risk categories and 26 risk topics. So those 250 integrated requirements I spoke of just a moment ago, each belong to one of the containers pictured here. And this taxonomy really helps facilitate risk roll-up reporting within ServiceNow IRM. And it's worth noting that we also have enterprise risk management as well as operational risk management taxonomies available as our clients begin to expand their programs beyond just IT risk. And this is the slide where it all starts to come together. So this is a high-level dashboard that's built within ServiceNow, and this is the output of our Edgile Arc content, as well as a workshop that's part of our Quick Start implementation offering. This is really an example of an executive dashboard view that CISOs can use, as well as take to their board to communicate where risks lie within their organization and what activities or investments might be needed to reduce those risks. Because as you begin to drill into each of the 6 risk categories along the left, you're able to see where risk management investments are paying off versus where there's still work needed to be done from both an inherent and residual risk perspective. And this is done both qualitatively and quantitatively. We are enabling our clients through ServiceNow to help address a lot of these gaps and ultimately close them. And furthermore, as our clients continue to mature their programs, we look to help them lower reliance on manually set risk values and instead begin to pull informed risk values from things that are native to the ServiceNow platform, like control tests, indicators, incidents, and the like, to give our clients a true living and breathing risk dashboard that evolves and matures with their program. In our demo, Jay will show an example of this dashboard built in ServiceNow and specifically how some of these techniques can be wired in through ServiceNow IRM. I'll hand it over to Brian now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gio. No, that was fantastic. And I know you talked a lot about the various techniques at the end there and capabilities that feed that risk register, for example, like incidents and control testing issues, et cetera. Next, as we start thinking about taking that a step further and automating your IT risk management journey, really the next place to start thinking about is, where else is there data on the ServiceNow platform, both from a risk and security capability, but even more broadly across, ServiceNow, and where's there some data that can be monitored through what they call indicators to continuously monitor, where is there risk, where is there change happening, is there data feeds coming in that need to be monitored, and that ultimately can also help influence, understanding the risk posture of the organization and get to that continuous monitoring vision that everyone is looking to get to over time. You'll see, for example, on this, we call this the honeycomb slide here, where you'll see various attributes being passed, from vendor risk management into integrated risk management, or from business continuity management into IRM. Same thing with SecOps. So this is just a great example of the interplay between, additional solutions, being all on platform. And the great news is that since that data is on the platform, we can monitor it and integrate it together.
And quick question for you there too, Brian. If someone does not have a complete CMDB, how would that play here? Is that something that would have an impact, or is it something you work around? If a great question. I'll have Jay talk in a minute about some of the kind of how we deal with that from a technology implementation perspective, but I'll just leave it in that, if I waited for every organization to get up and running with a CMDB that they were happy with, we wouldn't have a risk and security practice and I'd be out of business. So there's some really smart techniques that can be done
to manage, if you will, your risk and security programs on ServiceNow, while you are also on that CMDB journey. Jay, any other thoughts there?
Yeah, I would just add that ServiceNow made a very smart architectural decision in the way that they built the IRM solution and have these things they call entities. And these entities can be anything we would like to assess. Those could be applications or processes or functions or facilities, and they do not have to tie directly to CMDB records or other records in the system. That said, if you have that information today, there's a lot of opportunity to leverage that, automate some of the creation of these entities to really find some efficiencies in your risk and compliance programs.
Perfect.
Fantastic. Well, Jay, I think we're going to jump into the demo now.
Excellent. I will pull up the system and we will jump in. So spending the time here in our Edgile demo instance, want to start by looking at our risk overview dashboard. And this is focused on our information and technology risk management program. And this first tab here is showing us our program at large, looking at our risk register with these top two reports showing us how we have at a macro level reduced risk across the different topical areas within the organization. And more importantly, though, we have in the system that same report that Giovanni was showing us and speaking to a moment ago, showing the roll-up of all of this risk information into our information and technology risk taxonomy. So in this example, we have our identity and access management risk category, which has 4 different risk topics. And we can see for each of these, the inherent and residual risk, both qualitatively and quantitatively, to help us understand where there are pockets of increased risk within the organization. So we can see in our example that the authentication and authorization risk topic has a lot going on behind that we really need to make sure that we understand, have the appropriate controls in as an organization. But this allows us to take that information, populate that slide, and have those conversations with upper management, with our board of directors, and let them know, where are we spending our money and what is the impact to reducing risk within the organization. It's also worth mentioning that we have taxonomies for enterprise and operational risk for folks as they start to mature their programs, and those can be nested to say that information and technology risk rolls into a broader enterprise risk framework.
Hey, Jay, really quick, speaking of that, question came in. It says, I noticed that you have a 4 medium high there, assuming you have a 1 to 5 scale. Is it possible to use multiple scales or to have a 1 to 3 translated, or could you use just like a high, medium, low or high, moderate, low?
That's a great question, Cliff, and I'll actually maybe answer that with the visual on this next tab, where we'll have our residual risk heat map. And so in our demo instance, we have a 5x5 risk matrix, but this is entirely configurable and can be set up to align to your current risk methodology. So whether you're using a 3x3 or 4x4, or even a asymmetrical matrix like a 4x5, which we've seen with some of our clients. So it's incredibly flexible to align with your risk methodology. And we see this also as a great opportunity that if you're going through your journey and resetting the foundations of your IT risk management framework, this is a good time to revisit those impact and likelihood scales and make sure the organization feels good about that methodology.
Appreciate it.
So this particular tab is showing us all of the risks within our organization. So the previous tab was looking at the risk register and the universe of risk. This is looking at all the different risks that we've assessed for our applications, our processes, our facilities, and the like. And we can see that generally speaking, we've done a good job in reducing the risk. We only have 37 that are in that high residual risk bucket. But we can actually drill down on these reports and say, well, show me something like SAP financial accounting. And this entire dashboard refreshes and shows us the information that's only specific to SAP financial accounting. And we can see that generally speaking, they're doing fairly well. But there are these 2 residual risks that are in this high bucket. There are 5 almost certainly certain likelihood and 5 critical impact. And we can drill in on any one of these squares to see what is that data. So if we click here, we can see that there are 2 risks for SAP Financial Accounting that are in this 5 out of 5 high residual risk bucket. And that includes our user access review control and risk and our termination process risk. And when we click into this record, we can start to understand, well, what is this? This is termination process. The residual and the inherent risk are the same. That's indicative to me that there's potentially a control failure. And if we come down here, we can actually see that our control is in this not implemented state. So we have the ability to bring together the risk and compliance worlds where we can inform our risk posture based on our control and compliance statuses. So in this instance, because we have a control that's been deemed to be not implemented, our residual risk matches our inherent risk. Now, if we take a moment and kind of traverse through the compliance side of the house, we can see we have our control for SAP Financial Accounting termination process. We can see their expected control from what we would call baseline control procedure. And this is what do we expect of you based on the laws, regulations, internal policies and standards to the organization. And then they have the ability to document their actual control procedure. Now, this control procedure seems like it's likely designed adequately, but we can actually see here under some of our control tests that has been found to be not operating effectively. So it's an ineffective control. So that's really why this particular control is in that not implemented state. But in just another brief moment, kind of continuing the compliance traversal here. If we take this one step higher to a control objective, this is the high level expectation that we have a termination process control throughout the organization. This is where we start to see the different laws, regulations, and best practices. And we can see those by scrolling down to the bottom of this record. And there are 36 citations. These citations are ServiceNow's term for the different sentences, paragraphs, and sections of the different laws, regulations, and best practices. And we can see here in our demo instance, we have regulatory guidance from CIS, from Cloud Security Alliance, ISO, CMMC. I believe we have some NIST and others down below. So it gives us all of that information that we as an organization need to consider when looking at our compliance, which in turn can help us understand our risk within the organization. And just kind of quickly wrapping with another dashboard. Much like we saw our risk for an individual application, we can look at our compliance and say, across all those different laws and regulations, how are we doing for one in particular based on our program? So maybe we need to be able to see quickly how we're doing for ISO or NIST or GDPR or others, and maybe we want to see the program at large. In short, there's a lot of reporting capabilities within ServiceNow, and it's a better together world when you bring your risk and compliance programs together with ServiceNow Integrated Risk. With that, Brian, I'll hand it back to you.
Sounds good. Thanks very much, Jay. I think we're going to quickly wrap up here. We'll see if there's any other questions that have come in along the way. But really, as we just start thinking about some of our lessons learned in helping organizations get up and running with their risk journey, as well as thinking about how to integrate that with compliance. We believe it's really that pass one, starting with the risk register to set the program trajectory. Oftentimes, we are seeing a lot of folks start with the IT risk journey, if you will, and then from there building on the foundations to get to kind of the ever-changing enterprise risk and operational risk. I know Giovanni mentioned some of the taxonomies that we do have as well to help kind of kickstart that as well. We know a lot of organizations have their own as well that we're able to model out and manage throughout the same techniques and environment that Jay brought to life here. We even think about how do we nest some of these taxonomies as well. So, we're talking about IT risk, but obviously it's part of an enterprise risk program. So how do you manage an IT risk program itself, while then allowing that to roll up into, you know, a broader framework, if you will, for the organization. So happy to have additional conversations on that there. We've talked, I think, a few times about, you know, really making sure that we're linking control objectives to risk statement objectives. So we think that's super important there as well. And then I mentioned a bit earlier about how can you leverage the power of the platform, cross-reference fields, et cetera, in order to manage risk and have a more sustainable integrated program, if you will.
Yeah, and
so
I might add there, Brian. Oh,
Please.
sorry. I would say, you know, that's also where we start to look at how we can start to leverage data on ServiceNow and other systems to give us that continuous monitoring of risk and compliance. So for that termination process risk that we saw, if we're using something like ServiceNow's HR service delivery product, we'll be able to make sure that we're correlating, you know, when a user leaves the organization, and then making sure that access is terminated within an appropriate amount of time. So we get to start to see whether these risks are being mitigated in a real-time sense based on the data that lives within the platform.
Fantastic. Great point, Jay. Cliff, were there any other questions or comments from your side or from the Q&A that's been going on?
Yep. So I know we've been answering the ones in the chat. Two that were direct to me. All right. Sorry. This first one's kind of awesome. How long does this actually take?
That's a great question. So, you know, we get asked this question quite a bit. You know, I'll caveat this answer with every organization is different, and that there's a lot of decisioning that needs to happen along the way. So, you know, a lot of it really comes down to the culture and the pace that an organization's comfortable with to move through this journey, if you will. I will say on average, though, leveraging, I would say our quick starts to help folks get up and running here, kind of that pass one, pass two, we're talking like 6 to 8 weeks in order to go do that. You know, we've actually done that entire 5-pass journey before, you know, in 10 to 12 weeks. We have some clients who say, we're ready to go, we need it quicker. That can be done. We have some folks who say, give us a longer runway, and we're happy to do that. But I would say on average, some of those integrated risk and compliance foundations, pass one, pass two, you know, we're talking about, you know, 6 to 8 weeks, you know, just you know, month or two to get up and running.
All right, perfect. And then one other question that was direct to me is, sorry, trying to read this. Have you worked in multiple industries, or do you have a particular focus?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think the short answer is, you know, this applies to all industries, and we've had the pleasure of working with a large number of those. I will say those that are more highly regulated, if you will, and subject to exam, are the ones that, you know, that tend to lean in a bit quicker on some of these. So a lot of healthcare, financial services, and banking, et cetera. Those who are dealing with government, if you will, think of CMMC compliance, for example. We're working with state and local agencies, utility organizations, manufacturing, et cetera. So, you know, we are covering quite a gamut here of industries, if you will. That's why we've spent some time in breaking the content out into various industry packages. You know, a healthcare company does not care about some of the GLBA compliance items that we might see in banking and financial services. Ironically, some might, depending on what they're doing, but I think you get the point in that. You know, we want to make sure we're mindful in the way and how we've structured where people focus from a risk and compliance perspective.
Yeah, perfect. Looks like everything else has been answered in the chat. So I think with that, just wanted to say thank you for attending today. If you want to learn more, feel free to reach out to either Brian or myself. Obviously, any of the other panelists. Here's our contact information. And with that, gentlemen, thank you for participating.
Thank you, Cliff. We appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for joining. We'll speak to you soon.